Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Your daily SHTF update is about to commence. Now, we got the bird flu, which is ready to go apocalyptic. We got the price of commodities, which are entering hyperinflationary territory. In some respects, we got World War III that is alive and well. We got the markets that are in free fall, and yeah, it's over. The party is over. Okay, any euphoria that was felt in the markets as a result of the 2020 bounce back have all but fizzled out and crash landed. It is over. I am looking at raising the prices at the store by about 20 to 25% just to maintain margins because it's getting that bad. The price of packaging has nearly quintupled. Okay, we used to be able to get these boxes that we ship stuff in for 25 cents and they're now $1. All these prices are just skyrocketing through the roof, and I don't know how, it's going to get to the point where they're going to need to raise minimum wage. And then, of course, everything else is just going to keep on raising in tandem with that. And yeah, because Wall Street is gung-ho about this, because as I'm going to talk about, if you have any disposable income right now, the place to be, I can only speak for myself personally, because I don't want this to constitute financial advice, because I'm not a fiduciary. But if you have any money, if I have any extra money, I might put it into stocks, which deal with food, which deal with hard commodities. Okay, gold. If you don't have money to invest in stocks, and honestly, the stock market's a little sketchy right now with the US dollar. You never know how that's going to play into things. But you may want to look at stocks that sell food. Okay, stocks that sell commodities, fertilizer stocks, potash stocks. These are all things that are going through the roof, in my personal opinion. Any company that sells food is going to be making bank in the next 18 months. And Wall Street's all gung-ho about that. The problem is that means it's going to be a hellish existence for the people who don't have money to invest in the stock market, because the price of stuff is just going to get ridiculously high. Cost of living is going to go through the roof. So companies like Kraft, General Mills, cereals, Nestle, fertilizer companies, like there's a company based out of Saskatchewan, I believe it's Nutrien, and there's a couple other ones that are some of the biggest potash companies in the world, that the prices of their stock has been blowing up lately. I can't say it's going to continue like that, but we know that this Russia thing is likely going to stretch out for a long, long time. Now, there is some news on that front that we're going to get to in a minute, and we also have to talk about this bird flu situation. We also have to talk about another email I received from a Polish friend of mine about what's going on over there. But it's not looking good. Not looking good. Now, just to give you a sense of the price of commodities, and when we talk about nearing hyperinflationary levels, it doesn't get more hyperinflationary than this. Okay, the price of natural gas within certain places has increased about 150%. The price of nickel about 100%. The price of crude oil has increased nearly 70%. Coffee nearly 60%. Cotton nearly 50%. Wheat nearly 50%. Corn 40%. The Bloomberg Commodity Index as a whole around 35%. You got sugar at about 30%. You got soybeans at about 30%. You got hogs at around 20%. And we are about to see chickens skyrocket in price. The last I heard is the price of eggs is going to be doubling pretty soon. And if you don't know, eggs are one of the best forms of protein, which is the most recognizable by the body. It has the highest biological value, and that's why powdered eggs or dehydrated eggs are a great emergency preparedness store if you can get your hands on some of it. But it is not looking good, and I know firsthand that we are going to have to raise our prices to stay in business because it's just getting too damn ridiculous. And from what I hear, it's not going to get better. From what I'm hearing about this Russian war situation, it could potentially stretch out for a year. And if that's the case, then you can see what we've seen so far continue. The trends that we've seen in inflation and the increase in the prices of fertilizer. Russia right now controls the ports where a lot of the grain from Ukraine and Russia is shipped, obviously, and because of the sanctions, that's adding to the complexity of that situation. So we're only going to see food prices increase There's one guy named, I think it's Peter Zan. I don't know how to say his last name. I don't agree with him on everything. I think he misses the mark on certain things, and he's kind of a mouthpiece for the American military-industrial complex. But he makes some good points, and one of the points he makes is that within a year's time, the capacity of our food supply is only going to be able to feed around 6 billion people as a result of all of this stuff that is going on. That means potentially 2 billion people will be facing major food shortages and possible famine. Now, of course, as a first world economy, as a developing world economy, the burden is going to be on us to help out the rest of the world. But I mean, you can only do so much, and it's likely going to result in a Malthusian catastrophe of epic proportions, because a lot of the populations of the world who are young and who are still having 4, 5, 6, 7 children per family, nature is potentially going to be correcting that soon if this situation with Russia doesn't get resolved. And that's not the only factor which is contributing to the food crisis. If you haven't seen our video, which goes into great detail about the multitude of factors that are contributing to this rising cost of food, go and check it out. Just another one of those videos that doesn't really get much attention on YouTube, but probably should. Now, former CDC Director Robert Redfield, bird flu is the real pandemic and COVID-19 was just the practice. Now, we have a lot of these guys saying this, and I mean, this is something which I guess you would figure would be inevitable. The fact that, yes, indeed, because of the pervasiveness of the bird flu, and because it's so ubiquitous across the world, in millions and millions of chickens right now, and not only chickens but geese. I mean, zoos are locking down to it's kind of weird thinking of a zoo locking down because the zoo's already locked down, but zoos are locking down because they're worried about this bird flu getting into their populations. And 2 new human cases of H5N6 bird flu have just been discovered in China, and of course the kill rate for that is 50%. 50%. Even a pandemic with a kill rate of 5% across the board, like evenly distributed amongst the age groups, okay, even 5% would be nearly apocalyptic. Because I mean, remember, we're looking at with COVID 1 to 3%, like that's the upper, like really it's probably around 1.5% all case mortality, and then you have most of that which is on the upper end of the age demographic. Now, if you had 5% spread across the entire population, it would destroy the planet. 50%. I mean, the only good thing about 50% is that it probably wouldn't spread that fast. I think if you're talking about a earth-ending pathogen in the sense of the end of the world as we know it would cause complete societal upheaval and every dystopian nightmare you can imagine, because you know how hard the government's going to crack down, and you know how hard a lot of people are going to want the government to crack down. If we even hit a 10%, I think a 10% fatality rate flu pandemic would destroy the world. I think it would take us decades to bounce back from that in light of what has happened just with a 1.5%. So I can only imagine what a 20% or, like, heaven forbid, a 50% that had a incubation period which was slow enough that it could spread far and wide before it was detected. I mean, that would just be devastating. The first case, a 28-year-old man from Pyongyang in Henan province, developed symptoms on March 18th after exposure to live poultry. According to the Hong Kong Health Department, he was hospitalized the next day and remains in critical condition. Okay, 50% of people die from this. Now, fortunately, there's no human-to-human transmission yet. Unfortunately, they've already come up with a vaccine for this stuff, apparently. H5N1 vaccine readied for possible influenza pandemic. How do they do that? Who knows? I guess, this gain-of-function research is a real thing. And, I'm certain that I shouldn't say I'm certain, but there's reason to believe that they've been experimenting with this stuff. And, of course, things get leaked. And this is incredibly dangerous when we're in wartime, when we're having, these labs that are in the center of war zones, potentially at risk of leaking something into the environment. And you just never know. You just never know how this is going to progress. And because we are potentially entering a World War III situation, you remember how the pandemic of 1917 spread so fast with the soldiers, okay, and in the trenches and in the derelict conditions of the trenches. That's how it spread. So if we find ourselves in dire socioeconomic times where people have less access to healthcare, less access to proper nutrition, and just the standard of living is lower across the board, people are starving and in famine, then these diseases are going to spread a lot easier, especially if we're warring with one another, and that's our primary occupation. So it's not looking good on the flu front. Shanghai still under lockdown. I believe they're going to be lifting that soon, but they seen 25,000 cases in one day yesterday. And for China to admit to that, it's probably a lot worse, because we know that they're not willing to admit to much when it comes to this influenza or, pandemic related stuff. But that means that this is going to be protracted. The disruptions that's going to cause are going to continue to add fuel to the supply chain fire. And that's why I'm saying it's over. I mean, it's really over. I mean, if there's stuff that you want to buy it now. If there is, if you have any disposable income, choose very wisely where you put that. I mean, I don't see how a person could go wrong right now investing in commodities. To hell with Bitcoin right now. There's a time and a place for that sort of thing. And maybe when the dollar starts to teeter more explicitly, then that's when I'll start looking at those again. But for now, I'm sticking to precious metals and commodities. Food. If we know that we're going to see major food shortages in the next 2 years, if I had any disposable income, I'd be throwing it into stocks that deal in food. End of story. Take it for what it's worth. Now, supposedly the EU supplied S-300 missile launchers, which we just talked about 3 days ago, about Slovakia sending to Ukraine, have been annihilated by Russian precision airstrikes. This doesn't come as a surprise to me. I think the reality is going to become apparent to people pretty soon. I think once all the false information that's coming out and the propaganda starts to, once the smoke clears on that, it's going to become very obvious what has happened here. Now, from the Ukrainians' perspective, the best thing that could happen is they get into some kind of quagmire situation, I guess you could say. Actually, let me rephrase that. There's two ways that this could go, and there's two ways it could be interpreted. If we want to minimize the loss of life, perhaps this ends quickly. Russia does their thing. They go in there, they take what they're going to take, and that's the end of it. And hopefully we minimize human suffering, and Russia doesn't feel backed in a corner and doesn't feel the need to deploy nuclear weapons, because they, of course, view the Ukraine as, I shouldn't keep saying the Ukraine, view Ukraine as being an existential threat to their existence. They believe that. They believe that this is the back door, and that if they can't control it, then they might as well be, they're as good as dead. They're sitting ducks. That's how they view it. That's how they think strategically. So I think you can interpret it in a couple of ways. It'd be great if the Ukrainians could get them out of there, and that was the end of story. But there's consequences to that. One of the consequences being is that in that moment of desperation, they may deploy the nuclear card. If they were to go in there quickly and get it done, the problem is that you're likely to see a protracted war, because the end goal is going to be the total control of the entire country. That's what I believe, based on all the information I've been getting, is that is the end game, is total control of the entire country. But it's interesting that these S-300 systems that were just delivered have already been destroyed. And yeah, I mean, I guess it is what it is, right? We also have more, of course, we have more diplomats which are constantly being expelled from from European countries, which doesn't bode well for the future of peace talks. And we have a friend from Poland here who just has a few comments on the war survival guide that has been passed around by the Polish government recently. We did a video on that a couple days ago, and just wanted to provide me some information here. So the Polish Government Security Center compiled and issued a citizen's guide for crisis and war. This is an idiotic and highly impractical survival prepper guide that is laughable from a competency and practicality standpoint. Most actions by this government are highly incompetent. Welcome to our world. But it shows that the government is at least listening to the experts who say war is probable. The guide has been prepared by competent people, ex-special forces, but for a civilian, it is absolutely ridiculous and even dangerous. So you can go and check that out online. Just look up Citizen's Guide for Crisis and War for Poland, and you could probably get some kind of translation out of it. But, you know, it does definitely appear that Poland is very concerned about, you know, how this thing is going to escalate. And that should tell you everything you need to know. I mean, the Zelensky making all these concessions should tell everybody what they need to know about what's really going on the ground. People in the know, and people who are still starry-eyed and blinded by the propaganda, they're never going to see it until it becomes obvious. And they're going to try to massage it into the narrative somehow, to subtly. And you know, then of course they'll still deny it. But anyways, he also goes on to say, it is possible that our airspace will be closed as early as the end of April to civilian aviation. Flights must be suspended and airline traffic limited. This is officially due to a conflict between the Polish government and the Flight Controllers Union, as flight controllers are going on strike and leaving jobs. But there are many who say it is too convenient a coincidence, and the timing strangely coincides with the escalation of the Ukrainian conflict. And all I'll say is that this war could potentially rage on for a long time. And the longer it rages on, the higher the price of living is going to get. And they've already opened the strategic oil reserve. It's only a matter of time before that can only relieve so much pressure on the system. So let me know what you guys are seeing in your community. Are you seeing the prices of things rise? Because I know I sure am. I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm stunned. I could not imagine being like a starving student or somebody who is just living paycheck to paycheck right now, trying to eat a healthy diet, you know, without subsidizing it with your own garden produced stuff or buying in bulk. I mean, that's probably the best advice I have, is buy in bulk. You know, obviously people aren't going to be able to afford the fancy freeze-dried stuff. And I would caution once again, do not buy those big buckets that say 30-day food supply for like for $200 or $300. I encourage you, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Don't do it. That's why we don't sell it. We only sell the small packages because they're palatable. And quite frankly, if you're going to spend $200 or $300 on something survival prepping related, you might as well go down to the wholesale store, not Costco, but the place where the restaurants actually shop. And in Canada, it's called the Real Canadian Wholesale. And you can actually buy like huge bags of rice, bags of wheat, things like that. And that's how you're going to get through the next 18 months to forever. Because I don't think we're turning this ship around. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys. I'm getting better. Don't worry about me. Just a head cold. You know, I see some people saying, Nate, you look tired, you look worried. I ain't worried. I'm prepped. I'm worried for other people. That's who I'm worried for. I'm not worried for me. I'm ready for the world to end. I mean, it's, the end of the world as we know it. Obviously not the world ending, but yeah, don't worry about me. A simple head cold is nothing. You guys take care. Thanks.